This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom, and welcome to the Jewish Spotlight. You know, one of the greatest mitzvahs that we have as a Jewish people is the study of the Torah. The Torah representing the 5 books of Moses and all of the other literature we have from the prophets and from the writings, from the Talmud, from all the great sages throughout history. And this Torah is so incredible, its depth, its inspiration, its meaning. It's something that a person could literally spend a lifetime learning. So tonight, I want you to be my guest at the show, because we're going to learn together and do some deep Torah study, find out a little bit, a taste of what this Torah is all about and why Jews have dedicated so many hours and days and years of their life to be able to delve into the wisdom and the wonders of the Torah. The fact is that the Torah is something that is so special that it brings on a special type of meaning of life itself. And by looking at it today, we're going to be able to just have a little bit of an inkling of what it is that has inspired Jews throughout the centuries to be able to learn Torah on a daily basis even. Because, you know, this week, today, was really a very special day. This Shabbos, today in synagogues throughout the world, Jews have been studying what's called Bereshis, Genesis, the very beginning of the Torah.
Simchas hagiyulo, hine hine Moshiach bo. Sisu v'simchu b'simchas hagiyulo, hine hine Moshiach bo. Sisu v'simchu b'simchas hagiyulo, hine hine Moshiach bo. Sisu v'simchu b'simchas hagiyulo, hine hine Moshiach bo. Hine hu bo, Moshiach tzidkeinu, hine hu bo, mipeiro biyomeinu, hine hu bo, yavoi v'yikoleinu, mipeiro biyomeinu, Moshiach tzidkeinu, hine hu bo, hine hu bo, Moshiach tzidkeinu, hine hu bo, mipeiro biyomeinu, hine hu bo, yavoi v'yikoleinu, mipeiro biyomeinu, Moshiach tzidkeinu,
really doesn't say that much. But we see that time is an essential part of creation itself. That in order to be able to create a world, heavens and the earth, God first needed to create the beginning. Because without beginning, you don't have a possibility of having time, you don't have a possibility of having space, of having creation itself. Because anything to be created has to go from one second to another second, has to be some type of change to take place. And you can't have that change unless you first create time. So Judaism is always taught that time is, in fact, a creation of God. It is the fourth dimension that has been created since the beginning in order to be able to provide for those changes to take place in order for the world to come into being. Now, let's go into a little deeper also. If you look at the word Bereshis, it starts with the letter Beis. Now, those of you who might be familiar with the Hebrew alphabet know that the alphabet itself has 22 letters, and the first letter is an Aleph. Now, an Aleph is a very special letter. It's considered to represent Alufo Shel Olam, the master of the universe. It almost symbolizes God himself in a certain way. Why wouldn't God have created the Torah, written the Torah, with the Aleph as the first letter, showing God's unity, showing God's total oneness and omniscience in the whole world and everything around it, for a very interesting reason. Beis represents number 2. 2 represents dichotomy, conflict. There is separation. There's the idea of two-ness that shows that there isn't unity. Because the nature of the world is that there's physical and there's spiritual. There's positive and negative. There's yin and yang. There is all different types of forces working against each other in order to bring the world into being. As we're going to go into, even within godliness itself, different forces that work in order to be able to bring the creation into being. That's why when God first created the world, started off with a base representing the number 2, because in Hebrew, numbers and letters are the same. Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, is number 1. Base the second letter of the alphabet, is number 2, Gimel 3, Daled 4, and so forth and so on. So as a result, we see that base represents dualness. And part of our purpose, as we will soon find out, is to make from that 2, to be able to subjugate the 2, to really return and become 1. Now, let's go into a little bit more. You see that the first of the 10 utterances, the 10 statements that God made, let there be this, let there be that. First one was God said, let there be light. Now the question, of course, comes up, and all of our sages and commentators ask the question, why does it start off, let there be light? Light, at least sunlight, was not created until the 4th day, when the sun and the moon were created and put in the heavens. So what is this light that the Bible is talking about, that Genesis starts off about by talking about light being created in the very beginning? Let there be light. Well, if we look into the Kabbalah, into the sources of Jewish mysticism, we're going to see something very interesting. The Kabbalah states that the creation of the world was not just that God made a physical universe. God made something physical in order to be able to evolve or be able to exist in a physical state. But that the creation of the world, and get this, because you probably haven't heard this before, is really an emanation of light. That's why metaphysics is very close to physics. The theology of Judaism and the science of physics are very, very interrelated, because physics will teach you that much of the universe around us is what? Energy. What does E equals mc squared mean? It means that energy is equal to mass c squared times the speed of light. Because light is, of course, very integral to the whole existence of the universe. Sure, we look around ourselves and what do we see? We see physical hand, a table, a plant. We see all different types of physical things. But from God's perspective, this is all the emanation of light in order to be able to bring this light into a state of existence which we consider to be physical. Now this is somewhat of a Kabbalistic Jewish mystical perspective on things, but it sheds a lot of light, if I may say, on a couple of other things that we might have some questions about in life itself. Because really, if you think about it, we are only privy to a small part of the reality of life around us. What are we privy to? We know that we have a brain of 3 pounds. With that brain, we're able to use out our 5 senses to smell certain types of smells, to hear certain types of sounds, to be able to see certain types of colors. But the fact is, there are many colors outside of our color range, many sounds outside of our sound range, many smells outside of our smell range. In fact, right now, in the room where you're sitting, there are literally millions of, whether it be sound waves, whether it be cell telephone rays, television rays, CD rays, or other types of rays of different types of physics that are going through your room at this moment that you're not privy to, because you don't have the perception, the ability to pursue them. So what does that mean? That our perception of reality is very limited, but God's perception of reality really takes into consideration the whole of the being of what this universe is all about. Now in creating light, and bringing the world into being through light, the Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics, go on to explain something else very interesting. Getting back to the idea of conflict. Remember we talked about Breshit starting with base, meaning 2, dualism. That it was in fact in God, who is totally one, above any type of division whatsoever, above any type of separation, a total simple oneness of all energy, all being. This is who God is. But nevertheless, when God created the world, God created a force that would begin the process of creating that duality to be able to bring a world into being. And for this reason, we find there are 2 names that are mentioned in the Torah. In the beginning of the Torah, we have the Yud and the Hey, and the Vav and the Hey, which is pronounced Ado Shem. We don't say the whole name itself, except when we're in a time of prayer, but it begins with Ado. And then we have the second name, which is Elokim. The Ado Shem name represents the creative force, the force of Hashem which just exudes that light, exudes that energy, just flows that tremendous force of godliness into the world. Elokim, however, has the same gematria, the same numerical value as the word for teva, the word for nature. What is Elokim doing? It's holding back that tremendous force, that kindness, that love that God is flowing to us, has to hold it back in order to be able to create that dichotomy where light and the vessel are able to coexist side by side, where the light goes into the bulb and is able to be maintained. If 1,000 watts would go into a 60-watt bulb, we all know what would happen. So there's a dual force there working together to make sure that the flow of that energy going into the vessel, the bulb, is balanced enough to be able to make the world able to exist. This, in fact, is the same with the nature of existence that we live in, that there is that dual force of godliness working in order to be able to bring this world into existence the way it is. That's another example of the duality of life that we live in, that we referred to before. Now, we, of course, go on, and what do we face? We see in the story of Genesis the creation of really all of the world around us, from the insects in the ocean, to the birds, to the snakes, to whatever you can imagine. And of course the stars and everything about it. Now again, this is not necessarily something that happened over the course of millions of years, trillions of years. That's why we can say in the form of an emanation that the emanation can take place in a split second, because light is emanated in a split second. It doesn't take any time for light to bring into being. And as we say that Istaku baraisu bara alma, that God really pierced his eyes into the Torah, using the Torah as a blueprint, and through the piercing of that eye, through the blueprint of the Torah, created the world and brought it into being. Now, when God brought that into being, of course we have as a result then the 6 days of creation. Each day unique, each day creating something a little bit different. Each day bringing the being of that light into a different form, a different vessel, a different light bulb, if we should say, or call it that, to be able to give form to the world in a unique way. So every single atom, every cell, every molecule will have its own identity and its own particular way of being, so that nothing else will be like one other molecule. They'll all have something individualistic about them. And when God created this world during the 6 days of creation, of course, there was a purpose. God didn't just create it for no purpose whatsoever. It wasn't just a matter of God waking up one morning and having nothing better to do and saying, today I'm going to create a world. It was a matter of some deep intent that God had to create a world specifically where we would have free choice to be able to choose between good and evil, where we as human beings would be able to use our free choice to be able to create a world that is made devoid of godliness, and instead of it being devoid of godliness, being able to bring godliness and righteousness and morality and values into this world. In other words, not to look at the world just on its surface, on a superficial level, and saying, well, listen, I have my 5 senses, I look around myself, I don't see God, I don't see anything, there's no reason necessarily why I have to have values or have morals or behave in a particular way, so I can just do whatever I want to do. True, the person could come to that logical conclusion, which would basically mean that they're being very, could be hedonistic even. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is really something a little bit deeper. For us never to take something on its face value, to always look what's inside the book instead of just on what's in the cover. And this is really the interesting part of the way that God created the world. Now, put your seatbelt on, because I'm sure you never heard an explanation like this of one aspect of Genesis, which is a very famous explanation that many of the Hasidic masters give to our understanding of the creation itself, and the depth we can understand from the Torah itself. Because, you know, it says concerning the creation of Adam, that Adam and Eve were created in the Tzelem Dumus Elokim, in the image of God. So we know from that statement that there are certain things about God that we can learn from just by studying ourselves. So when God said, let there be light, God said, let there be man, God said, let there be animals or fish in the sea or stars or whatever it might be, why does the Torah use the term that God created through speech? Did you ever think about that? For those of you who read Genesis, why does it have to be through speech? Why couldn't it just say God made the world? Or God thought and brought the world into being, as some religions might say? But there's a very interesting explanation. Reason is as follows. If we look at free choice is something where you cannot be influenced one way or the other, to have to choose one way or the other way. Now, if God had created the world through action, what would have happened? The world would have been created. What happens when a potter makes a pot, or somebody makes an art piece? They make it, they can walk away. They really have nothing to do with it. If they put the signature on it, fine. If they don't, nobody would probably know who the artist was, or who the potter was for that point, for that matter. As a result, what happens? There's a disconnection between the thing that's made, the art piece itself, and the creator. God didn't want that the disconnection should be so great. On the other hand, if God had brought the world into being through thought, then thought and the thinker are so close together, there's an intrinsic bond there that would be very, very difficult to break. As a result, our free choice would really not be there also, because wherever we would look, we would be so close to the thinker, being that we would be made by God's thought, that we wouldn't really have the opportunity to exercise free choice. On the other hand, speech is something very, very different. Speech is something where I am speaking to you. What am I doing? I'm taking a thought in my mind that only I know, and I'm enclosing it into words, and I'm giving this to you right now in order that you should be able to take the words off, because the words are just the vessel for my thought. I take the words off and take, hopefully, the idea the way it is in my head, and it should get to your head the same way. So what is God doing? God's creating a world where on the outside there is a vessel covering it over. And God's giving to us and asking us to learn the language that God is speaking in order to be able that we should understand what is the inner message, what is the real soul, the core of this life that we lead in this world that we're in. And that's really the key to why God created the world through speech. Because speech itself gives us the opportunity to be able to try to better understand godliness, understand who God is, what God is. But in order to do that, a person has to learn language. A person has to be careful to understand the small little intonations of a voice, of body language, of any variety of different things. So this is why speech was chosen to be the medium through which God would create the world. There shouldn't be too much of a presence of godliness, shouldn't be too little of a presence of godliness, but enough of a presence that if we would just learn how to unclothe, to take off the outer language, the words, and get to the core of it, we'd be able to discover God hidden within. And that's the secret of speech. Now, if we go in a little bit deeper into this, we're going to see something else. That during the sixth day of creation, when Adam and Eve were created, of course there were many very interesting, crucial events that they went through, which to this date, we believe, have a tremendous effect on who we are and what we are. Now let's take, for instance, the well-known sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is interpreted in many different ways, but I want to give you the traditional Jewish interpretation of that, so you'll understand where Judaism is coming from, because Judaism has a very important and, of course, an original way of looking at it, because the Torah was given to the Jewish people with the original way of understanding it by God. What happened was this. Adam and Eve, during the sixth day of creation, before the Sabbath even had come, needed to have in God's mind that potential to be able to sin, that potential to exercise free choice, to even go so far as to rebel against God himself. That was a necessary part and parcel of the sixth day of creation. It wasn't something that happened on the following Monday or Tuesday. It was something that happened on Friday afternoon, soon after they were created, before the Sabbath came into being. So as a result, God wanted that this process take place, that they exercise their free choice, so to say, in order to be able to choose to do something wrong. And then, what did God say at the end of the sixth day? Very interesting. And this is going to be hard to understand, because it's a very difficult concept to accept. It says at the end of the first day and end of the fifth day, it says, Ki Tov, God saw and it was good. Then in the second day, it doesn't say that it was good at all, because second, again, is a day of division, base. It says in the third day that it was Ki Tov. It says twice the words that it was good, because Tuesday was a day of unification after the division of the second day. Now in the sixth day, it says Ki Tov Ma'od, it was very good. And our sages asked the question, what does it mean that it was very good? Why very good? Sure, it was the completion of the creation, but why was very good? And they explained the following. It was good because of the good that was created. It was very good because of the evil that was created. In other words, God saw that evil was balanced enough with the good to provide the free choice for Adam and Eve to be able to either be good people or the opposite. And that was very good in God's eyes, because God knew then that the proper layout, the proper mechanism, the proper modus operandi was available in order to be able to help them fulfill their purpose in life, which was to exercise their free choice and make sure that they were going to choose to do good. So we see that evil, in fact, was a creation of God placed in the world for a purpose to provide that free choice for Adam and Eve. Now, then we get to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What occurred? They made that choice on that sixth day in order to be able to show that that was in fact a choice they were making to have to, or to at that moment choose to do something wrong. It was an incredible thing that a created being should be able to choose something that was wrong. There's no question about it. So as a result, this was a great, great accomplishment that God felt was necessary for the creation of the world itself. Now you might say, why would God want them to sin? Why would God want them to do something? Why would God give them punishments like were given in Genesis? And the fact is that those punishments were really part of the process of creation also. God didn't want them to remain in the Garden of Eden. God wanted them to come into the world itself, to be part of the world, to be able to function in the world, to work to create and transform the world from the very bottom up into a place that would be a dwelling place for God. So as a result, God sent them out of the Garden of Eden to begin a process of growth on their own, starting from literally scratch. And this is what it says at the beginning, or I'm sorry, at the end of the sixth day, just before the Sabbath came. It says that God created the world la'asos, asher bara Elokim la'asos, that God created to do. Now, again, our sages ask the question, every single word in the Torah has meaning, has significance. Why would the Torah say that God created the world to do? What does this word to do mean? It seems to be extra. It seems to be unnecessary. So the Talmud goes into this and explains that la'asos also has the root l'sakein. It's related to the word to fix, to transform, to make it a better place. In other words, God gave us deliberately an imperfect world so that we would be able to perfect it, that we would be able to elevate it, that we should have the honor to be able to fix it in even the smallest of details, to be able to take whatever negative it might be, whether it be a difficult situation we face in our own personal lives, whether it be something negative we find in the world around us, not to be intimidated by it, not to feel that it is ultimate evil or whatever, but to realize that everything comes from that oneness. Everything comes from God, and as a result, everything can eventually be returned to that state of oneness, to be reconnected to God. So our mission, if you would say so, and this mission we share with all of humanity, all of us, all children of Adam and Eve, share the mission of l'sakin olam, tikkun olam, fixing the world and making it a better place. Now, in order to do that, it takes a certain amount of strength from above, a certain amount of energy and inspiration from God. And for this, the Torah goes on and says something very interesting. Our sages explain that when a person says the statement of Vayichulu Shamayim v'Haaretz v'Chol Tzavom, the last sentence just before the Sabbath comes, what does that sentence mean, and what does it mean when we say it together with somebody else? It symbolizes that we are to be like partners with God in the process of creation. That each and every single one of us should be a partner in our work, partners with God in everything that we do, to feel that what we're doing and to know that we are assigned, we have the privilege, the responsibility to be serving a very important role in this creation that we live in. And that's a beautiful honor to have. Sure, we might look at ourselves as servants during the high holiday season. We might look at ourselves as kings during the Passover season. We look at ourselves as many different types of relationships with God. But in this sense, we are to a certain degree a full partner with God in the process of creation. Because what we're doing in this process is we are taking this something that God has created and we're returning it back to its state of nothingness, reuniting it with its creator. Through the mitzvahs, the commandments we do, through the good deeds that we do, through the things we use in the world around us and during our life, transforming them into becoming something godly, something meaningful, by having the proper values and morals in our personal life, in our business life, by dealing with our children, our spouse, our community in a proper way, by giving charity, by observing the mitzvot. These are things that in fact transform the physical world around us into a godly place. And that in fact is the special meaning of being able to be a partner with God. A tremendous obligation, yes. A tremendous responsibility, true. but also a tremendous and wonderful privilege to be considered to be a partner with God himself. And that is really part of who all of us are in this mission of life that we have, a soul placed in a body in order to accomplish a purpose during the time that we have the gift of life in this world. Now, right after we, of course, complete that last sentence, where do we go then? We go into the Holy Sabbath. Adam and Eve began their life with the Sabbath as a way of observing and celebrating the life they were given. Adam and Eve, with the recognition of the God who had created them, who had put them through the many things that they had experienced during that day, they were ready to observe a day of rest. Ba Shabbos, ba Menucha. The Shabbos came and rest came, because before there was nothing that would simulate rest. There was no creation that would be considered to be rest. And as a result, when they rested, they were able to really appreciate the world that God had given them. You know, we run around all day long, we rush and we use our cell phones and our computers and our faxes and our modems, and we're on the beat all the time. But Sabbath comes, the world comes to a state of rest where we get to appreciate the world the way God created the world. Not the way the world is the way we create it, but the world the way God is, with our family, with our friends, with our children, with our community, with our God, in order to be able to really reunite with that original Shabbos that Adam and Eve had in the bliss of God's presence when they were originally created the first week. And that Sabbath comes, of course, after every 6-day cycle, every single week, week after week, for all of eternity. And it's a beautiful experience to have. And that, in fact, is the time that we have to be able to learn Torah, to be able to sit back and to be able to study a little Torah. Because this, in fact, is one of the greatest gifts that we as a Jewish people have, is the study of the Torah, to learn more about what it means to be a Jew, what it means to fulfill our purpose in life, what it means to know the halachot, the laws, the customs, the traditions of the Jewish people, to observe them in every way possible, and to be able to connect or reconnect with our tradition, as beautiful as it is. So I ask all of you, use this as an opportunity to maybe go out and start a little study of Torah yourself. You can call our superphone at 76 Torah, as we have on the tape at the end of this show, or any of the local rabbis in order to be able to study. Chabad, of course, is all over Long Island. But look up Chabad.org or Chabad Alai. Do something to study some Torah wherever you might be. Because when you study Torah, you reunite with the experience at Mount Sinai. You begin in every way possible the process of really starting to do what you can do to become one with Hashem through the Torah. And that is a beautiful experience.